There are wounds that cut deeper into the soul than any physical pain, especially when that wound is inflicted by the person you loved and trusted the most. Until that fateful night, check if you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love to know how far our stories are reaching. I firmly believed I was the happiest woman in the world. Until the kick my husband delivered shattered not only the bone in my leg, but also my heart and my trust. But in the darkest, most desperate moment in the clear eyes of my little 4-year-old daughter, I began to see a faint ray of light. The pounding of the torrential rain against the window glass resonated with the same violent fury as the man standing before me. An agonizing pain starting in my left calf spread all the way to the top of my head, preventing me from even screaming. I could only curl up on the cold tile floor, biting my lips until they bled. My vision was blurring and losing focus, but my husband Damon's gleaming shoes stopped right in front of me, were terrifyingly clear. He leaned down, grabbed me by the hair, and my head snapped back without my being able to offer any resistance. That handsome face I had loved so much was now contorted with rage, red and horribly deformed.
"How dare you talk back to me, you parasite?"
"I only asked you for $50,000 for the business, and you can't even give me that. Will you be satisfied when you see me begging on the street?" Every word was a dagger plunged into my chest.
"Parasite."
I had quit my job at a good firm to dedicate myself to our daughter, Layla, and our family, just as he had demanded. I had given him all my savings and even the money from the sale of the condo my parents left me when I got married to finance his supposed business. And now in his eyes I was nothing more than a parasite, holding back the tears that were fighting to escape. I could barely articulate. "Really? I really don't have any more money. Honey, I gave you the last cent I had last month." "Liar," Damon roared. He tightened his grip on my hair.
Didn't
have the strength to explain it to him again. The pain in my leg was consuming my entire consciousness. Instinctively, I knew something was seriously wrong. Aside from the throbbing pain, I felt nothing else in my leg. Soaked in tears and sweat, I pleaded desperately. "Please, please stop. My leg hurts so much." Damon let out a cold, chilling laugh. He let go of my hair, and my head slammed hard against the floor. "Let it hurt. Maybe that'll knock some sense into you and get rid of your smart aleck attitude." He spat those cold words, walked over to the sofa, and picked up his mobile phone. And then, as if he were another person, he began to speak in an incredibly sweet, loving voice. "Yes, my love, I got the call. I'm just wrapping up a work matter. As soon as I finish, I'm coming to see you and our son. Yes, I can't wait to see you both." "Our son?" I felt my heart stop. I couldn't have misheard.
Who was he talking to?
What son? My mind filled with confusion, and the physical pain was buried under an even greater mental shock. Just then, I heard a muffled sound coming from the slightly open door of my daughter's room. How long had she been there? The child was hiding behind the door, her eyes round and tear-filled, terrified, covering her mouth with her small hands to stifle her sobs. Seeing her broke my heart in two. She had seen everything. She had witnessed the entire nightmare scene. Damon must have heard her, too, because he quickly hung up the phone and glared at her furiously. "And why are you crying? Stop making noise and go back to your room." "Close the door." Isla trembled from head to toe, shaking, but she didn't move. She looked at me. Her eyes were filled with fear, but at the same time they shone with an intelligence beyond her age. And in that instant, amidst the despair, a single spark of hope ignited. I looked at her, and fighting back the pain, I subtly shook my head.
"No."
Then, discreetly, "My savings gone." "Not gone," Grandpa said firmly. "Redirected. That condo was never fully in your name alone. It was held in a family trust one established years ago, for your protection. Damon forged signatures to access funds, but the core assets? Untouched. And your adoptive parents' estate, Franklin and Martha, left more than you knew. Investments, life insurance. I managed it all, waiting for the day you'd need it." Dr. Hawthorne leaned in. "We've frozen what remains of Damon's accounts. His business was a front, gambling debts, a mistress in Queens with a 2-year-old boy. That's the son, he mentioned. He's been siphoning from you for years, but also from shady loans. He'll face fraud charges on top of the assault. Tears blurred my vision, but they were mixed with relief. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Grandpa reached for my hand, his grip strong yet gentle. You were building your life. I didn't want to overshadow it.
But now?
This mansion, the trust, it's yours. Over $50 million in assets, conservatively. Enough to start over, to give Isla the world. Just then, the door burst open with a patter of tiny feet. Isla toddled in, rubbing her eyes, clad in a fluffy robe 2 sizes too big. Mommy, Grandpa. She climbed into my lap, then reached for Grandpa, who scooped her up with a chuckle. There's my brave girl, he murmured, kissing her forehead. You saved your mommy last night. Isla beamed, then whispered loudly to Dr. Hawthorne. Are you a prince? You have shiny glasses. The room erupted in laughter, tension easing like morning fog. As we finished breakfast, plans formed. Therapy for me and Isla. Divorce proceedings, swift and ironclad. A new home, perhaps expanding this one. And for Damon? Justice. Without mercy by afternoon. The doctor had fitted me with a brace and prescribed rest, but my spirit soared. I stood on the sun-drenched terrace overlooking the ocean, Isla playing in the garden below with a new nanny. Grandpa joined me, cane tapping softly. The man with the glasses looked up from his tablet and smiled warmly, adjusting his tie as he stood to greet me.
Good morning, Sophia.
I'm Dr. Elias Hawthorne, Mr. Alexander's personal attorney and old friend. Please have a seat. We have much to discuss, and you look like you could use some strong coffee. Grandpa folded his newspaper neatly and nodded, his eyes softening as he pulled out a chair for me. Sit, little one. Eat first. Strength comes before battles. The spread was overwhelming, freshly baked croissants, eggs Benedict, fruit platters, and a pot of aromatic coffee that filled the room with its rich scent. Isla was still upstairs, but a maid had already checked on her, assuring me she'd bring her down once she woke. I managed a few bites, the food tasting like freedom after years of scraps and tension. Dr. Hawthorne waited patiently, sipping his tea. Finally, Grandpa broke the silence. Sophia, last night, I should have acted sooner. I knew something was wrong when you stopped visiting, when your calls became excuses. But I respected your space. That ends now. I set down my fork, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. Grandpa, I was ashamed. I ignored your warning about Damon. I thought love meant enduring. But he took everything. The money, my trust, my safety. And that phone call last night, he mentioned a son. With someone else, Grandpa's jaw tightened, a flash of that authoritative steel from the night before. He exchanged a glance with Dr. Hawthorne, who cleared his throat. We've already begun investigations, Sophia. Discreetly, of course. Damon Garrett has been detained for the moment under charges that will stick. But there's more you need to know about your own legacy and his deceptions. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents. Bank statements, property deeds, even paternity test requests. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. This can't be right. The condo on Park Avenue. I sold it for his business. Without insults. I slept peacefully, surrounded by the love of my family, and I knew that tomorrow, a new life and a new struggle would begin. And this time, I wouldn't be fighting alone. The next morning, I woke up as the sun's rays streamed through the large window, painting warm rectangles of light on the wooden floor. The pain in my leg was still throbbing, but my mind was strangely clear and sharp. Isla was still sleeping soundly beside me. It was probably the first time she had slept peacefully after such a long time of fear. I carefully got out of bed, so as not to make noise. Seeing myself in the large vanity mirror, I was startled. The woman in the mirror looked haggard. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale, and there was a faint bruise on her cheek, a reminder of Damon's slap from last night. But deep within that exhausted gaze, a flame of rage and determination began to burn. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to change for myself and for my daughter. I took a shower and put on the clean loungewear that one of the staff had prepared for me. When I went downstairs to the dining room, I found an abundant breakfast served at the table. Grandpa was reading the newspaper, and beside him sat a middle-aged man with a very intellectual look, wearing glasses and an impeccable. I fully trusting my husband gave him without hesitation all my savings and the money from the sale of the condo Grandpa had given me. When Isla was born, Damon said I should stay home to take care of the child while he managed the finances. Once again, I followed his advice, and that was the beginning of my tragedy. Damon's business didn't seem to be doing well. He constantly complained about difficulties and asked for more money. I no longer had anything to give him. I could only encourage him. Slowly, his attitude began to change. He became irritable and often yelled at me. Arguments became more frequent, and finally, he started hitting me. At first only when he was drunk, but then it became a habit. He used me as a punching bag whenever things weren't going well for him. I endured everything for my daughter, and for the small hope that he might change. I didn't dare tell Mr. Alexander. I was afraid of worrying him and that he would feel disappointed in my choice. I kept all the pain to myself until this night when everything crossed the line. The car stopped in front of an imposing classic-style mansion with a large garden in the Hamptons. It was Mr. Alexander's residence since his retirement, a place I had visited very few times. Upon entering, the silent, solemn atmosphere of the house calmed me in a strange way. Mr. Alexander led us to a spacious room on the second floor. "This was your adoptive mother's room," he said. "From now on, this is your home." I looked around. Everything was meticulously cared for. On the desk, a photo of my adoptive parents smiling happily was still in its place. Tears welled up again. After so many years, I had returned home. That night, for the first time in years, I was able to sleep deeply without nightmares of violence. It was Mr. Alexander who handled all the funeral arrangements and consoled and encouraged me. "Your parents are gone, but you still have me. From now on, consider me your family." Afterward, Grandpa helped me get a stable job at one of the group's subsidiaries. My life slowly regained stability and the sadness faded. And then I met Damon. He was a new employee in the sales department, 2 years older than me. He was tall, handsome, eloquent, and always seemed ambitious. He told me about his difficult childhood and how hard he had fought to get where he was. I, longing for a place to lean amidst the pain of losing my family, fell for his apparent sincerity and determination. We fell in love. I still perfectly recall Grandpa's look the first time I introduced him to Damon. He didn't say much. He just observed him in silence. That night, he called me into his office. "Sophia," he said in a grave voice. "That young man seems smart, but his look isn't honest. I can't interfere in your love life, but be careful. You never know what's in a person's heart." At that moment, blinded by love, I didn't pay attention to his warning. I thought he was too mistrustful and that Damon was a good person. I even justified it, thinking perhaps his humble background made him seem a little reserved. Mr. Alexander just sighed and said nothing more. We got married a year later. Mr. Alexander gave me a luxurious condo on Park Avenue and a considerable sum of cash as a dowry, saying it was the savings my adoptive parents had set aside for me. After the wedding, Damon said he didn't want to live off my family and wanted to start his own business. He showed me a very convincing business plan. Had fallen deeply asleep in her great-grandfather's arms. Seeing her angel-like sleeping face again squeezed my heart. If it hadn't been for Isla's call, what would have become of us tonight? I looked at the man sitting next to me, who my daughter called Grandpa. In my vague memories, Grandpa's figure was nothing more than blurred fragments. I was abandoned at an orphanage at birth and adopted by a good couple of civil servants. Although they weren't rich, our home was always full of love. My adoptive father, Franklin Patterson, was an engineer at a construction company. He was a man of few words but adored his wife and daughter. My adoptive mother, Martha Patterson, was a primary school teacher. She was always very affectionate with me and taught me right from wrong. I loved them and was grateful, as if they were my true parents. And in the memories of that happy childhood, A special man sometimes appeared, someone my parents always respectfully called Mr. Alexander. Back then, Alexander Monroe was the CEO of the construction group where my adoptive father worked and his best friend. I remember he would come to our house at Christmas laden with gifts. He had no children and had been widowed young, so he had a special fondness for me. I would sit on his knee. He would stroke my hair and often say, "This girl is very smart and bright. I'm sure she'll grow up to be someone important." His gaze was always warm and affectionate. He also paid for my entire education from grade school to college, saying that investing in education was never a bad investment. My adoptive parents initially refused, but he insisted he just wanted to do something for his beloved granddaughter. Tragedy struck when I was in my final year of college. My adoptive parents, who were on a business trip, died in an unexpected traffic accident. My world collapsed. In my moment of greatest despair, "Sophia,
Say something.
do you want to see your husband in jail?" he shouted, struggling desperately. I just looked at him in silence. There was no trace of affection left in my eyes, only contempt and cold indifference. Grandpa signaled to another bodyguard, who immediately handed a thick envelope of cash to the landlady. "This should be enough to cover the rent this man owes you and compensate you for the inconvenience. As of now, what happened here never happened. Understood?" The landlady, seeing the envelope, widened her eyes and nodded repeatedly. "Yes, yes, of course. I haven't seen anything."
I don't know anything.
Everything was resolved quickly and cleanly. Grandpa turned to me and with his warm voice again said, "Come, little one. Let's go home." Grandpa lifted Isla into his arms. The child, feeling completely safe, buried her face in his chest. Another bodyguard helped me walk. They led me to one of the luxury sedans. Inside, a woman in a white coat was waiting. "She's the family doctor," Grandpa explained. "She'll give you first aid." The car pulled away slowly, leaving the modest apartment and a violent husband being taken away by law enforcement. I looked out the window. The New York City night still glittered with its dazzling lights. But in my heart, a great storm had just begun. And at the end of this road, I would find not only the truth, but also a family and a refuge I had never dared to dream of. The luxury sedan glided through the night city. The ride was so smooth you could barely feel the movement, a world away from the crowded subway cars or Damon's old motorcycle that I was used to. Inside the car, the doctor gently disinfected and bandaged the injuries on my leg. Fortunately, there was no fracture, but severe soft tissue damage that would require rest for a while. Isla, exhausted by extreme fear. Just then, Damon's motorcycle noise sounded at the street entrance. He had surely finished talking to his mistress and was returning to play his role as the attentive husband. Seeing the luxury sedans blocking the street and the men in black outside the door, his face turned paper white. He parked the bike carelessly and ran toward us shouting, "What's going on? Who are you people?" Seeing me in Grandpa's arms, his bewilderment turned into anger and surprise. "Sophia, who is this old man?" he yelled, pointing rudely at my grandpa. My grandpa turned slowly. His eyes, sharp as blades, pierced Damon. His gaze was so cold it seemed to freeze the air. "So you are Damon, my granddaughter's husband. So what? Who do you think you are, breaking into someone else's home?" Damon, still not realizing who he was dealing with, maintained his aggressive attitude. "Who I am is not important." Grandpa's voice was deep and grave. "What is important is what you just did to my granddaughter." As he finished speaking, Grandpa's gaze fell on my swollen leg. One of the bodyguards beside him understood the signal instantly and stepped forward. His voice was icy cold. "Damon Garrett, you are under arrest for domestic violence. You need to come with us."
What?
"Domestic violence? Don't talk nonsense without proof." Damon began shouting nervously. "The evidence is the injuries on my granddaughter's body," Grandpa said, "and the cry for help from my great-granddaughter." Damon was speechless, pale as a ghost. He looked at me, then at Isla, who was hiding behind me. In his eyes was an expression of disbelief. He had never imagined that the daughter he ignored would be the one to ruin everything. Since he couldn't utter a word, Two bodyguards approached and held him firmly by the arms. "What are you doing? Let go of me." It was the deep roar of several high-end sedans entering the narrow alley. Next came the sharp screech of brakes and the decisive sound of doors closing. My heart leaped.
It was Grandpa.
It had to be him. Before I could react, I heard the firm footsteps of several people approaching our doorway. They were nothing like Damon's. They were rhythmic, imposing, with an intimidating air. Just then the door of the apartment across the hall burst open, and the shrill voice of the landlady cried out, "What is this racket at this hour of the night? Who are you looking for?" But her voice immediately cut off, replaced by a gasp of surprise. I peeked through the peephole and was speechless at the scene unfolding. Facing the landlady wasn't a single person. There were four burly men in black suits with impassive expressions, as if straight out of a movie, and in the center of them was my grandpa. He was no longer the image of the kind grandfather I remembered. He wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, his back straight, leaning on an ebony cane with a silver handle. His hair was completely white, but his eyes shone with such a penetrating, authoritative light that no one would dare look him straight in the eye. "Where is Sophia's apartment?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud, but its weight was such that even the normally haughty landlady trembled as she pointed toward our door. Grandpa nodded, gave a signal, and two of the bodyguards immediately approached our door. "Sophia, it's Grandpa. Open the door." Hearing his familiar voice, I rushed to open it. As soon as the door opened, I couldn't hold back any longer and collapsed, crying in his arms. "Grandpa." He hugged me tightly, patting my trembling back with his warm hand. "Quiet now. It's all over. Grandpa is here. No one will ever hurt you again." But strangely crisp. "Isla, my girl, you did so well. Can you tell Grandpa where you are now?" Grandpa's deep, powerful voice on the other end of the phone was like a balm that instantly rescued me from my paralyzing terror. It was a simple question, but it carried a strange sense of security that made me realize I was no longer alone. I quickly brought my mouth closer to the phone my daughter was holding. My voice trembled, but it was much clearer than before. "Grandpa, it's Sophia right now." I managed with difficulty to say the address of that modest apartment complex in the South Bronx that Damon had secured and which had now become a hell. "Understood." Grandpa's voice showed no trace of hesitation. "Lock yourselves in a room. Lock the door tightly and don't open it for anyone, including your husband.
Grandpa is coming there."
The call cut off, and the screen went dark. Isla looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. She was still scared, but a light of hope shone in her gaze. I hugged her tightly. My heart was still racing, but it was no longer out of fear. It was from the intense conviction and expectation that this horrible nightmare was about to end. I carried my daughter into the bathroom and quickly wiped the tear stains from her face and mine with warm water. I had to remain calm. I had to appear strong in front of my daughter. I didn't know how or by what means Grandpa would arrive, but as I had always done since I was a child, I trusted him unconditionally. Time passed with suffocating slowness. Sitting on the bed hugging my daughter, I strained my ears for any sound from outside. The rain had subsided, and all I could hear was the rhythmic drip of drops on the metal roof. About 20 minutes later, a strange sound came from the street entrance. It wasn't the noise of a normal motorcycle. I pointed with my finger to my mobile phone, which was on the side table next to the sofa. My look was a desperate plea. I wasn't sure if my 4-year-old daughter could understand my intention, but Isla was much smarter than I thought. She looked alternately at my finger and me and blinked. Then she nodded, a gesture so small that only I could see it, taking advantage of Damon having turned toward the window to light a cigarette. Isla, barefoot and silent as a kitten, crept toward the sofa. My heart was pounding, about to explode. "Please don't let him turn around." I prayed silently. When the child got close to the side table, she pretended to trip, shouting, "Ouch," and falling forward. My phone, struck by her hand, dropped onto the thick area rug. "How clumsy you are," Damon yelled without even turning around. It was time. Isla quickly picked up the phone. But instead of putting it back on the table, She hugged it against her chest and ducked under the table out of Damon's sight. I saw her small, trembling hands pressing the screen. The password was her date of birth. I had taught it to her for a possible emergency. The screen lit up, and I watched her tap the contacts icon. She slid the list with her tiny finger and stopped at the name I had saved as beloved Grandpa. She brought the phone to her ear with tight lips. Her voice wouldn't come out. I knew she was terrified, but she was trying with all her might. And finally, I heard my daughter's shaky, choked voice whisper into the receiver a phrase I will never forget. "Grandpa, Grandpa, Mommy is going to die." There was silence on the other end of the line. 1 second, 2, 3. A silence that felt like an eternity settled in the tense air. I was about to despair, but then a deep, warm, authoritative voice came through the small speaker. It was a whisper,